All right, we're about to go live in 10. The sun is finally coming out here again. Okay. Good evening, everyone. So excited to have you join us today. I am here with Dr. Sarah Moon, and she is coming in from the West Coast, so 3 hours behind. Again, I'm Charmaine Jackman. I'm the founder and CEO of InnoPsych Inc. And as always, it's wonderful to have you with us today. I am excited to continue our focus on highlighting psychologists in the queer community who are doing amazing work to promote mental health and wellness in our communities in general, particularly communities of color and our LGBT communities as well. So I'm excited to welcome Sarah Moon with us today. Welcome. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll have you just share who you are and what you're going to do. We're going to get into a wonderful conversation. So again, thank you all for being here. Excellent. So as you know, InnoPsych is an organization that's charged with disrupting racial disparities in mental health. Our goal is to make it faster and easier for people of color to find therapists of color. We're really trying to increase access to mental health resources. And we also want to change the conversation about mental health and therapy. So we have a very cool, fun directory that features therapists of color across the country. And Dr. Moon is one of those therapists that will be listed soon. And also, we, in addition to having our therapists of color directory, we also feature lots of conversations like the one we're having today that really works to model how we can talk about mental health, to really normalize those conversations and to increase the visibility of mental professionals of color in the community and the work that they're doing, again, to promote healing and wellness. One of the things we're really excited about this year is our 2021 campaign. And that's our goal, is to bring in 2021 therapists this year. We are moving along, but we need you to help support that mission and help get us to those numbers. So if you're a therapist of color, please join our directory. It's free for everyone to join our directory. And if you are looking for a therapist of color, you can definitely find us at innopsych.com. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. And in addition to some of the work we're creating around access for mental wellness and mental health, we also have some really cool products that we're coming out with. So we recently launched our My Time to Thrive card deck. And this features cards that are based on mindfulness exercises, lots of activities to help with behavior activation, quotes from very famous and cool people. So we really want to make sure people have many ways to access and promote their mental wellness and their emotional well-being. So if you're a member of our community and a supporter, we have a special discount for you. So head over to our website and put in the promo code HELLO15. In addition, we have some cool t-shirts coming out. So I'm going to show those to you next week. So the designs are really, really exciting. So lots of good things happening for InnoPsych. And again, we really thank you for your support and know that we could not do all that we've been able to do in a short space of time without you. So thank you all for that. So, and now to feature our guest, Dr. Sarah Moon, as I mentioned. And so I like to have my guests introduce themselves. And one of the ways that I have them do that is for them to share their why. Tell us a little bit about what got you into this field, what was your inspiration. You know, we talked a little bit before, and we shared, like, for many of us, people of color coming into this field, we heard lots of messages that, therapy is not a real thing, or you're not going to make any money out of it. It's not a career. So there are a lot of messages. And even to this generation, I've talked to college students recently, and they had similar message from their families. So I know we have a lot of messages that we have to fight. So how do you move through those messages and end up being where you are today? So tell us a little bit about your inspiration. Let's start that off that way.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me here, Charmaine. I don't have a super meaningful or purposeful kind of journey into this field. I think I kind of stumbled upon it. When I think growing up, though, I was very much an introvert and introspective person. Really tried to understand the question of what makes life meaningful has been a constant question for me since I was younger, especially because my family immigrated from South Korea to Los Angeles when I was just a young child, and moving through the immigration and acculturation process, becoming a citizen, kind of trying to reach for that quote unquote American dream as an immigrant. I was just doing the things that I needed to do. I was going to school, playing sports, extracurricular activities, doing all the things that we typically think of when you think of East Asian, hardworking immigrant families. And of course, the pressure of succeeding in the States was definitely a message that was given to me by my family, but also the Korean community that I was a part of. But this question of what makes life meaningful wasn't fulfilled by all the answers I was getting around get a higher degree and become a doctor, a lawyer, the typical things. And going into college, I just decided I want to study something that I would enjoy, and I chose psychology. It was kind of, I think at the time it was unconscious. Now when I think back, it really makes sense. I was trying to figure out my experience in the world, my family's experience in the world. And post graduating undergrad, I figured out late, you can't really do much with an undergrad in psychology. No one ever told me that. I figured it out once I graduated and was trying to look for a job, and took a couple of years off and thought, I really want to see if this field is for me. And I took this big risk of saying, I don't know if I actually want to be a therapist and work with clients. I don't think I'll ever know until I actually try. So let me give it a shot.
Wow.
I'll go for it.
Wow.
And luckily, ended up really finding a lot of joy and meaning and purpose in the work as a psychologist. So that, I think, so going back to that question of what makes life meaningful, that I think that kind of clued me into the, pushed me into this field. But I didn't consciously know that going into grad school. It was more of processing and being in my own therapy and understanding my experience in the world that helped me make sense and meaning of why I kept asking that question. And I still do.
Yeah. I know, right? So that's interesting. So you, for a college degree, you decided, let me try this thing. And part of it, I hear that a lot, right? Wanting to kind of figure out and make meaning of some of the experiences you've had. But fast forward 4 years at the end of college, you're like, I can't really get a job that's going to really pay with this, right? And I think that's a lot of people, don't know that. And I think part of it is like not having good mentorship around that, or seeing people who are like you or come from similar backgrounds who could give that guidance. So for me, it's so important to really help spread that message to the high school students so that they can definitely see this as a viable career, but I could also understand what is the path, what is the journey through this process. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. So you ended up with psychology degree, ended up in grad school, and found that it was really something that you connected with. And tell me, like, what was their particular class or an experience? What was the moment you're like, okay, yes, this is it. I love it. What was that moment for you?
I think actually it wasn't necessarily the classes, but being in my own therapy during grad school and really, really taking a deep dive into my own internal world and the way I thought about things and the way I made sense of things and trying to heal and grow from the things that I had learned growing up. And seeing the change that I was able to go through, I think it was so grounding, especially as a person of color in this world. Groundedness wasn't a part of my upbringing. It was survival mode constantly. And therapy was one of those things that helped me understand what are the things that I need in place in my life to feel grounded. And in experiencing that, and then trying to help others experience or actually, finally have the time to think through what would help them experience a fulfilling life. It was actually meeting with clients. Classes were great. Knowledge is great, but you don't really understand the mystery of therapy until you're actually in it. I think,
and the beauty of it, right? Too.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting. My program did not require that we went through therapy as part of our training, which I wish they did. Excuse me. We did have to go through. We did like a group therapy course, and so part of the group therapy course was actually being in group therapy. But I kind of wish that they had required everyone to go through therapy. It was definitely, I said, not a requirement. I think more schools are making that a requirement or like a strong suggestion now. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, ours was a strong suggestion too. It wasn't required.
Right.
But I needed it at the time.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about what's your day-to-day. Tell us a little bit about, what's your work? What are some of the responsibilities that you hold and the things, rather, your full-time positions and any community work that you do as well.
Yeah, so currently I'm working out of my home office. I would say about 70% of my time is seeing clients, individual and couples therapy. I was doing group therapy. I did it for a little bit during the pandemic and ended that group. And then the other times, I used to be an assistant training director at the Danielson Institute at Boston University and maintain that relationship there. So now I have been involved with consultation around diversity, equity, inclusion, providing feedback on that, and running a BIPOC trainee mentorship and supervision group. So because even when I was going through training, and maybe this was your experience too, I never once had a BIPOC therapist or mentor or supervisor. I think maybe I had one throughout the 5-6 years I was in grad school. And my hope is to continue to provide mentorship to trainees of color who are going through programs that are predominantly white, through internships and practicums that are predominantly white, and they don't have access to people like us, people that look like them. So I'm running that as well as another BIPOC trainee group at Cambridge Health Alliance for the trainees.
So your
there.
hands are still, So you're on the West Coast, but you're still really connected to the Boston area.
Well, I just recently moved to Oregon in August. And with the pandemic, it's just allowed more opportunities to be involved in different things outside of where I'm physically located.
Great.
So training is something that I'm very passionate about. So still involved with that and doing some writing. But most of my work is clinical work at this point.
Great. So about 70% of clinical work. And the reason I ask this, because we have people who are listening who are um, people who are training, we have people who are established, and we have people who are interested in the field. So hearing
Mhm.
our journeys and the things we do, kind of opens up their minds about what the possibilities are. So I love that you are involved in training. It is so important. And yeah, I did not have a supervisor or mentor of color till I got to my pre-doctoral internship year. And I had the wonderful Dr. Jessica Henderson Daniel as a mentor and a
Mm.
supervisor. So that was amazing to go from zero to like this amazing woman,
Yeah.
this amazing Black woman. So that, yeah, that was a great experience. But yeah, and I remember in my program there was one Black woman psychologist, and we had all 5 majors or programs. She was an experimental psychologist, and
Mm.
I feel like she was off in her little lab somewhere. So I don't think I've had one conversation with her. So
Huh.
that was kind of, and I was in Mississippi, right? So it was very interesting. But I had about 2 or 3 people, women of color, Black women particularly. So we really supported each other during our journey. So that was helpful.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I hear some writing as well. What are you working on?
Well,
If you can tell, you can
I
tell.
just finally finished a book chapter that took years, it felt like. It's actually in being printed right now. It's an APA book on spiritual diversity in psychotherapy, and
Mm,
wrote a chapter
nice.
on providing um, I forgot the title already. It was around how to incorporate spirituality, or what to consider when you're working with an LGBT person who has a religious upbringing.
Ooh, all
So
right.
one of my specialties is the intersection of religion and sexuality.
Oh my God. So you have to watch next week because my pastor is coming on.
Oh,
Um, and he's an openly gay man who runs a Baptist church. So we're gonna talk about. He's been really promoting mental health.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's so funny.
Oh, I'll
I'm
definitely
gonna
tune
have him watch
in.
this. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
very good, cool. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about your work and like who are the people that you serve. I think that's a really nice segue into, we talked. You do sounds like mostly individual and couples work, but yeah, talk about one of the questions I ask everybody. So like when you show up and people understand who you are and that you share aspects of their identity that may not have been represented in this therapy space or their assumptions about who therapists are. So when clients hear you and I hear about your different aspects of your identity that they connect with, tell us like what is that response from them and how do you navigate that? For me, I remember when I was one of my first internships. Like I mentioned, did my graduate work in Mississippi. It was one of my first practicum placements, and I came out the room, and this Black woman and her young daughter was going to be their therapist, and she's like, "Oh my!" She was like so excited. "Oh my God, I can't believe it!" She like almost cried, and I was like, for me, it's like I think that was like a moment. It's like, "Oh my God, I'm doing the thing that I really wanted to do." It's so affirming in that space.
Mm.
So, how do clients react when they realize like, "Oh my God, this woman connects with so many aspects of my identity"?
Yeah, I think there's this a natural connection that
Mm-hmm.
they experience, I think, and same for myself. In being able to be a therapist of color and to understand the lived experience, right, of
Mm-hmm.
whether they're a person of color, um, identify as Asian or Asian American or immigrant or queer.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it's always the best fit, as a therapeutic
Right.
relationship, but there's already this. I don't necessarily have to explain the ins and outs of what it feels like to be in this world as a
Mm-hmm.
person of color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's an kind of an ease or
Yeah.
settling into the session that I
Mm-hmm.
notice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Before that not having to explain, right? And that to have this something explain the unexplainable is like frustrating for people. And I had that experience where people tell me, I don't want to go have to explain my culture or why I'm making certain decisions, because it makes sense in my cultural upbringing. It may not make sense
Sure.
from a Eurocentric perspective, but like, and I don't want to have to explain to you why I'm making this decision that may not make sense to you, right? So some
Mhm.
of those things I've heard clients say, just like, and again, right, doesn't mean that we're always going to agree, because we're coming in with shared identities, but also different experience, different lived
Right.
experiences. But sometimes that just like knowing, okay, this person is going to get 90% of what I have experienced, or if they don't
Mhm.
quite, I just need to say a little bit more and they're going to get it, right? So
Mhm. Mhm. Especially with my Korean clients who use words that fit their experience in Korean, but there's no direct translation for that.
mm,
So using words or sentences in Korean or something their parents might be saying to them and not having to
right,
necessarily translate, um,
yeah.
it's, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny. I part of my process and working with InnoPsych and um, trying to increase our visibility, I applied for this program. It's a major accelerator in the Boston area.
Mhm.
And one of the so I had when I submitted my application, I got some written feedback. And one of the reviewers says, "Well, I don't understand why it has to be a person of color, or why does that matter?" And I'm like,
Oh,
it
wow.
matters. It matters. And
It
that
definitely
highlights that
matters.
person's privilege, right? It matters so much. And
Mhm.
the other thing I say too, like, it matters for a lot of people. It doesn't matter for everyone, but people want choice. Like, they want to be able to choose, right? But when there's so few of us, or it's hard to access us and you don't have choice, people then choose not to access therapy at all. And for me, that's the
Mhm.
heartbreaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you have the directory, right? The therapy
Exactly,
support directory.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Great. So I'd love to, I know we're almost close to our time.
Mhm.
I can't believe the time has gone so quickly. So tell us a little bit about kind of what your perspective is about healing. Is there a particular theoretical orientation that you use in your work? Like, how
Mm.
do you, yeah, what does healing mean for you? When you're working with a client, you know, what does it look like when, maybe it's time for them to end the time with you? Like, what does that look like? How do you help clients, achieve the goals that they want to achieve?
It's a great question. I think because there's been an evolution and change and shift in terms of how I think about healing.
Mm-hmm.
When I went through grad school, um, CBT and psychodynamic, psychoanalytic theory was kind of the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what I've realized in going through that, being an assistant training director and supervising and mentoring, is that we all are learning these theories and then having to shift it and change it to what we experience as people of color. We
Mm-hmm.
have to deconstruct it, and we're
Yes.
left with that work.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
went through 5, 6 years of grad school, and then I came out with just learning how to deconstruct things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think since then, I've just been trying to figure out, okay, what does healing mean? So for example, my philosophy is therapy is extremely important, but it's not the only way of healing.
Yes,
It's
I
not
say
the
the
only
same
way.
thing.
Yeah.
Love it.
There are so many other healing practices and healing
Mhm.
contexts. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean I'm minimizing the importance of therapy. I think it's very important.
yeah,
And
yeah.
let's look at ancestral healing. Let's look at
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. Let's look
Mm-hmm.
at community healing,
Mm-hmm.
and look for an encompassing, comprehensive view of what healing can be for each client and for myself.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you said that. Because I say that all the time. I always say, I'm a therapist, so I'm going to recommend therapy. And there are other
Mhm.
ways of healing, right?
Right.
So it's so true. And I really appreciate you saying that. And a lot have been really pulled. I think more it has really kind of emerged through the pandemic is really using body-based work. So how am I helping
Mm.
people use their bodies or connect to therapies or activities that really engage
Mhm.
their bodies to release trauma and tensions that they're carrying. Um, So yeah, so cool. Yeah, love that. Love that. So one of the things I ask people is to share a personal struggle that they've experienced, right? And again, part of it is, you know, you know, letting people know we have experienced, difficult challenges in our life. There are things that we use, things that we share with our clients that we use ourselves, to recover and to heal through those challenges. I'd love to hear you kind of share something that you went through and how you've been able to manage and navigate that situation.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is something that I've gone through and I'm actually still working through and working on. I think it's going to be a lifelong process for me and the reason why I created the Instagram that I have right now, it's the Queer Korean Psychologist, and it's talking about what does it mean to be queer, an Asian, and an immigrant, but also who grew up in a very conservative Christian evangelical upbringing. And what does it mean? So when we talk about coming out, when we talk about authenticity, there are ways in which religion, culture, have really impacted our capacity to really think about ourselves in a more expansive way. So, I experienced that growing up in an Asian community, in a Christian community, and really deconstructed my faith and deconstructed my understanding of religion and spirituality. As a queer person now, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to bring those identities together? And with the family pressures or maybe internalized homophobia, everything that we've internalized that weren't healthy for us. How are we working through that, healing from that, so that we can live a life that's most authentic to who we are? So I think that's part of my personal journey, and continuing to be in that journey with my partner and navigating those family dynamics and cultural dynamics as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. What were some things that you found helpful through that journey? And you said it's still right. It's still a journey, right? The road isn't ended. It's ongoing.
Yeah.
What are some things that you found helpful or that you use to help you kind of navigate through those situations?
I think the main thing is kind of the way I understand what it means to be authentic. I will say this, when I think about all my intersecting identities, I look for coherence and understanding and meaning versus everything fitting together, exactly fitting together, or some kind of resolution that we're looking for. The way I approach these different identities that I'm still working through and helping my clients work through is that, does it make sense to me? Does it fit with what I believe is true and meaningful to me? So I think this idea of coherence, finding understanding, has been really helpful.
Great. Yeah. And even within that, as you're speaking, I am being pulled, like also listening and trusting your voice. It's not, that's been a part, right? Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I know a lot of people out there will connect to what you've just shared, and really, sorry, appreciate that. Anything that you want to share that we haven't gotten to? Any projects you're working on, or anything that would be helpful for our community to know about the work that you're doing? Or
I don't think so particularly. Just want to say happy Pride. It's a celebratory month. It's complicated for a lot of people. And I think there's so much joy and laughter and connection and community within the queer community. And so just want to highlight, as I shared, as much as I've gone through and continue to go through and helping others work through their queer identity, I think there's so much to celebrate. So just want to end with
Yeah.
that.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh, actually, as I just any resources you would recommend. So you just shared your Instagram handle, the Queer Korean Psychologist. So please follow Dr. Moon there on Instagram.
Mhm.
Any other resources you think would be helpful for people to connect to? Anything like what's your go-to for
Yeah.
your clients in terms of connection or wanting to learn more? Maybe there are parents out there looking for, how they can support their children. Yeah, any
Yeah.
resources?
I would say, so since a lot of my work is with Asian queer folks, I would
Mm-hmm.
say look at my Instagram. I try to put resources on there around different organizations
Okay,
or people to
great,
follow.
great.
But I would say there are LGBTQ Asian um, family support and resources out there. I think there's one under GLAAD, GLAAD,
Mm-hmm.
the Trevor
Okay.
Project.
Mm-hmm.
So the big organizations are doing a lot and putting out a lot of resources.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Mhm.
Good to know. All right. Well,
Mhm.
it was a wonderful pleasure to get to connect with you and to hear more about your work and your
Mhm.
journey. Thank you so much for bringing that to us and sharing also the intersection of faith and queer identity and immigrant, all of the different identities that many of us hold. So thank you so much for being open to sharing that with us.
Thank you
And
so
again,
much.
we look
Mhm.
forward to connecting with you more and learning more about your journey and your work. So thanks for sharing that and thank you for being here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, everyone, have a good night. We will catch you next week. We'll have the I was going to say the Honorable, the Reverend, Dr. Reverend Brandon T. Crowley, who's the pastor at Myrtle Baptist Church, and he will talk about his identity as a queer man who leads a historically Black church in the New England area. So very, very exciting conversation. I'm looking forward to having. Take care, everyone. Until next week, take care.